Boys, the very first iteration of the Arabian Peninsula in Europa Universalis 5 is here, and this is a very juicy one. Now, as some of you probably know, in the 1300s, depending on which historians we listen to, the Arabian Peninsula was heavily fragmented, and it was either towards the end of the so-called Arab Golden Age, or it was about 100 years after the Arab Golden Age ended and the period of the Islamic gunpowder empires had started. Again, this depends on the historians we listen to. However, they all agreed that the Arabian Peninsula was deeply divided in this particular time period, with the more centralized kingdoms being in the southern coastline, including Yemen, Oman, I believe Ormuz, and even Jarwanids over here. So I guess south and eastern parts of the peninsula would be the more centralized kingdoms, whilst the majority of the inland and the western parts of the peninsula being essentially migrating Bedouins or tribes or whatever they will be displayed as in Europa Universalis 5. The Islamic Golden Era, of course, refers to the period of time in which the Islamic world produced some of the more important advances, both literary advances as well from certain perspectives, technological ones, and towards the end of the Islamic Golden Era, some major gunpowder empires appeared in this region, with the more prominent one being the Ottoman Empire, which within the 14th century, which includes the 1300s, of course, they already were heavily using artillery before most of the other nations in Europe were even using them. But they were not the only ones, because the Safavids in Persia also were using them, and the Mughals were famous for using artillery in their conquests of India after the fall of the Timurids and the transition of parts of the Timurids into the Mughals, right? One thing that probably you will notice is that Hormuz is not Hormuz anymore, it is Ormuz now. That is how the locals would pronounce it, right? Jarwanids is definitely one of the newer ones in this particular area. In EU4 timeline, it would be Hausa. Yas Queen is still here, and they're actually bigger than they are in EU4, so for sure people gonna do a lot of shenanigans with the queen around here, aren't they? We also have a little bit of a perspective of what's going on in Persia. We have Laristan, Shabankara, and we also have the Muzaffarids over here to the side into the eastern parts. In the central part of Arabia, we have the tribes of Otaiba, Khahtan, Subai, Dawasir, which is also known from EU4. We have Mecca, of course. Subai again is a little bit divided here. We got Subai here and Subai here. So Subai is everywhere, but they're not really connected. So Dawasir is going to have to either conquer both provinces, or Subai has to conquer Dawasir. It's a guaranteed war there at the start of the campaign, that's for sure. Some other newer additions that we don't see in EU4 are Mutair, Harb, but then we do have Shamar, Aniza, which are regulars for feasting as far as the Mamluks are concerned in 1444. And one thing that struck me really as a bottleneck for the Arabians is the fact that this entire coastline here is not connected. So this is not colonized land at the start of the campaign, meaning that Yemen and Oman are likely going to struggle to meet up in the campaign itself, because if we look at the province map mode, we see that there's actually no provinces here connecting Yemen and Oman, which I find a little bit interesting from a strategic perspective. This is going to make for some very interesting divisions between the eastern and the western part of the Arabian kingdoms. Now we also have the map mode with the wastelands, because the one I showed you guys does not show the wastelands themselves, and we see we have quite a few wastelands by the Jarwanids. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deserts in the center of them that they cannot pass. Then we have another one in Mutair and another small one in Yemen, as well as a little bit in the central part of Oman. Apparently there are no society pops in Arabia, as the would-be society pops are the essential tribes already shown as settled countries or tribal nations really in the central part. And Pavia mentions the kingdom here as Yemen, Mecca, Oman, Ormuz, and Jarwanids, and the tribes are basically everybody else that is not these 5 kingdoms. An interesting feature of the latter is that their lands will be full of tribesmen pop. Oh, that is interesting, making the tribal estate the most important one to manage. Do you even have other estates if everybody is tribesmen? That's a interesting question there. As a final note, I'd like you to understand that this is our interpretation for the situation of the game, although it might not be the only one. The good news regarding this is that we will be open to feedback and making changes as usual, but also this setup can easily be changed through the script script of the game, thus making it completely moddable once the game is released. So basically what he's saying, if you want to have Society of Pops here instead of settled tribes, you can do it as a mod yourself when the game is released, essentially. This also, as you guys already know if you followed up with the dev diaries, the way you probably will mod EU5 is identical to how you mod EU4, so it's going to be extremely easy to mod the game itself. The Dynasty map mode, in essence, most of these are named the same as the country itself, but not always. Like Dawasir has Lailai instead of Dawasir, whilst Jarwanid has Jarwanid. The Jarwanids from Jarwanid Dynasty, right? Ormos is Ormos, and then Nabhani, Rasulid, Katatid. Also, Pavia mentions that Al AI Kwawi is actually a mistake, so it's they will remove the AI. That's just it's not gonna be there. Don't worry about it. There's no AI in 1300s Arabia, that's for sure. This is the location map mode. Quite a lot of locations actually in Arabia. I was expecting it to have significantly less, but it is full of locations. I mean, compared to Africa, I feel like Arabia has almost as many locations as West Africa has itself. There's a lot of really small locations, which means that Arabia is likely going to have a lot of potential for development in the campaign itself, although that is a little bit debatable considering this is pretty much entirely desert with very small exceptions. This is the province map mode. The Laila, wait a second, isn't this the doggy? Wasn't that Layla? Wasn't that a doggy TV series? Am I wrong? What was her name? Laila, Leslie, something like that. I don't remember. Yemen's got some very similar province names to what we have in EU4, whilst in the central part we have a little bit of a difference here. Nizwa also, I believe, is in EU4 over in the Omani part, and it just gets a lot weirder as you look into the central part of Arabia though. Qatar over here is really cool. I lived in Qatar for 5 years. Surprised that it includes this area, although Qatar should technically be only the peninsula though, right? These are the areas, Najd being the greatest of them. Then we have Bahrain, which is the island of Bahrain, also the region. Okay. And we got the Oman Sea. We got Yemen, pretty big, Hejaz, and Al Samar, as we know from Viki 3, right? As you would expect, the entirety of Arabia is arid, with a few small exceptions, little dots over here and there, which apparently are cold arid, still arid, just a little bit chilly. The terrain map mode is quite diverse though. We've got some mountains over and some hills in Oman. We got plateaus in the center. We got flatlands, and majority of the Arabian Peninsula, especially by the coastline, is primarily flatlands. Then we got more hills and mountains and plateaus in Yemen, and alongside the entirety of the ridge here, the western coastline here, before the coastline really. I'm curious where they're gonna build the line city. I think it's somewhere around here if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong. Let me know if you guys know in the comment section. And what do you know, it is all desert, with parts of Yemen, Mecca having some non-desert provinces. We got some grasslands, some sparse, a little bit of sparse here, a little bit of sparse around the grasslands, and some woods. Oh wow, we have a whole two locations with the woods. That is wild to me, actually wild. As you would expect, there's not many great natural harbors. Yemen apparently starts with two 100% ones, and that's it. That literally is it. If you're Yemen, you might have an actual decent naval situation. If you're anybody else in Arabia, you best forget about it. Now this is the cultural map mode. We apparently have a clear distinction between the regions of Arabia, Najidi being primarily distributed in the central parts where the tribes are, alongside Hijazi and Bedouin also being in the eastern parts and also defining the tribal bit. Bahrana over here is basically in the island of Bahrain, as well as parts of the eastern coastline of Arabia. And we have Khaliji in Qatar, in the area south of Kuwait, between Kuwait and Qatar. But then we have Bahrain in between. Is that accurate? I'm actually curious if we have any Arabian scholars or anyone that's more documented in this area. I'm actually really curious about that. We also seem to have a really interesting one, Shibi, oh lo lo lo. Is that where that comes from? Is it from this tip of the? Probably not. Is it? No. Then we do have Omani, which is obvious in Oman. In the south, we have quite a few different cultures. We don't have only Yemeni, as you would expect. We also have Hadrami, Mehri in only one location. I'm not sure if it's one or two. Might be one or two locations that we have Mehri in, and Dofari, as well as, check this out guys, the island of Socotra has its own culture, Socotri, which is cool. I'm not sure sure how much population Socotra would have in 1337 though. I know that modern Socotra is one of the most sought after islands in this particular region, with UAE, Saudi Arabia, and so on essentially violating the sovereignty of Yemen by illegally occupying Socotra and nobody talking about it because both of these nations are allies of the United States. In the north, we also have a little bit of a sneak peek there of Levantine culture. We see there's a clear mixture between Bedouin and Levantine in the area around Petra essentially. But what I don't understand is why there's no such thing between the rest of the Arabian cultures. Like, it's pretty clearly defined from what I can tell. Here is Najidi and here is Khaliji. There's no province or location between where there's a mixture of the two with the 50% makeup or nothing of the sort. It's really clear. I don't know if they had just flat out have not yet finished working on this particular area when it comes down to the cultures or what's happening, but that's just strange to me. Now, when it comes to the religious makeup of the Arabian Peninsula, we've primarily got Shiites and Sunnis with Ibadis also in the corner over here, primarily in Oman, and that's it. We don't have any Nestorian Christians, we don't have any Jews. Pavia did say that the minorities are not yet fully scripted, the religious minorities, which I hope we're gonna see, because I know EU4 we only have Shia, Sunni, and Ibadi also in Arabia, but the reality is, especially in the 1300s, there would still be quite a few, not a lot, but at least 5 to 7, 8% Jews and Nestorian Christians around the Arabian Peninsula, for sure, especially by the coastlines where they would have trades with other parts of the Arabian world, parts of Africa and India and so on. We do seem to have some Christians in the northern parts here around the southern bits of Iraq from what I can tell. I think those might be some type of Miaphysites. The goods map mode, you probably can imagine it's predominantly dates and livestock. In fact, I think there's more dates and livestock in Arabia than in any other part of the world from what I can tell. And sand. So there's three main things that Arabia produces: sand, lots of it; livestock, which is obviously the goats and the camels. We have a little bit of cotton in the north. We have some pearls. In fact, Qatar has a tradition of pearl hunting back before they discovered oil. So I'm glad to see that Qatar has pearls as one of its resources too, alongside Yas Queen and parts of UAE. I forgot what this is called, or Moose, I believe, right? We got more pearls, more fish, livestock. There are some different things around here. Like, we have gold over in one of the tribal lands, as well as more gold in Mecca. We have here another gold province. I don't see any gold provinces in Yemen, but I do see quite a little bit of incense and some coffee. There's like 2 provinces, locations that produce coffee in Yemen. That's it, just 2 provinces. Wow. Coffee is going to be really high demand, I believe. We have some silk here as well in Yemen. We got 1 copper producing province in Oman. That's it, just 1 copper in the entirety of Arabia? No way. That is it. Oh my god. Wow, that's going to make for a very interesting gameplay. A few iron locations in the west coast of Arabia, lead 1 location as well. Some stone. I guess the Arabians are gonna have to really trade a lot of things. Oh, Yemen also has 2 medicament provinces or locations and 1 aluminium or alum. These are currently the markets. Remember, this is not final. They might change this before release. We have Hormuz as a market, Al-Hasa, Al-Hajr, Mecca, and Adan. Al-Hajr and Al-Hasa are essentially the tribal areas, so I'm assuming these markets might be merged into one before the game releases. Let's see. Population, roughly 500,000 all over the tribal lands. 770,000 in Mecca, 1.6 million in Yemen, which is huge, 200,000 and roughly 100,000 in Ormuz in Oman, and 465,000? Wow, that's a lot in the Eastlands. The entire region apparently has 4.5 million pops. Next week, we're gonna see Iran and the Caucasus. Sifsi asks, no natural harbors in Bahrain, and Pavia says, feel free to suggest candidates as usual. I would personally like to see also not necessarily Bahrain, but like Qatar or UAE area or Oman, literally any of the eastern coastline or the southeastern coastline of Arabia have some natural harbors. Oman, at least, I do think that they should have at least a 50% natural harbor, if not 100%, just for balance purposes. I don't know how much from a historical perspective this would be accurate, but from a balance perspective, I like to see one at least. People are already asking about no connection between Yemen and Oman, and Pavia says Oman effectively functioned as a semi-isolated area during the period, and this is not very traversable region. We'll make an extra check after feedback, but in principle, this is working as desired. Here's my take on this, Pavia. I don't know if you ever watched this video, but my opinion is that there should be a corridor that is colonizable later in the campaign, because if the game goes all the way to the 1800s, obviously, as you progress, it's gonna be a lot easier to traverse those areas with new technologies being discovered, and just historically it also happened, right? As later down, and even in the 1300s, people still traversed those corridors, even though they were very rough indeed, not necessarily lived by anybody, true, but at least they were traversed. So at least make a corridor. If you're not gonna make provinces, right, at least one of those little corridors that you have in Africa and so on, even in Arabia as well. Big day for Islamic viewers. Apparently Medina, Mecca, and Jerusalem are confirmed holy sites for Islam, so that's cool to see, and I'm really hyped to see what kind of bonuses we get from having these holy sites, right? Hopefully it's not just missionaries. I hope it's something a little bit more, I don't know, more different. Yeah, actually Prince Ru makes a good point here. Hormuz is the Arabic version. Why not make it Hormuz, because that's the English version, right? Pavia kind of agrees with them too, so we might see that change. Also, Pavia alludes to more works being done on Shiism and overall the religious aspect in the region, so we might see Islam a little bit more fragmented or a little bit more diverse than it is as it stands right now. Curious to see what he means by this. He doesn't really give much away, but I'll definitely keep an eye out for this. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Love y'all, and I'll see you in the next one.